PONDering with CGR Undertow.
One of the criticisms you hear the most when it comes to Nintendo is that they repeat themselves, right? That they go to the Mario well too often, that they're always coming out with the same games based on the same characters. I don't think that's entirely fair to say. Do they release a lot of Mario and Zelda and Donkey Kong games? Yes, they do. But the thing is, those are iconic characters. I've heard Nintendo, they're often referred to as the Disney of video games. Does Disney do a lot with Mickey Mouse and, their main iconic characters? Of course they do. But that's because those characters are so iconic. It's because people love them so much. It's their identity as a company. So I don't think it's necessarily a problem that they take advantage of those iconic characters and use them and give people what they love. That's not the problem. I think the problem is that they're like Disney in another way. And that's that they're very conservative with those characters. The other day I read an interview that really brought that into focus for me. It was with Takashi Tezuka, who works at Nintendo. He's one of their main designers. He was assistant director of the first Super Mario Brothers, director of Super Mario World. He was assistant director on Mario 64. So he's been at Nintendo a long time, and he's been one of the main guys on a lot of their really major games, specifically a lot of their major Mario games. And he was talking about Mario and the important elements of different Super Mario games. And one thing that he said really caught my attention. He said, "It's vital that we work hard to make sure that we present everyone with the same image of Mario across all these different games." And that one sentence really brought this Disney comparison into focus for me. Because, Disney wasn't the only company that had an iconic character in animation. There was another company. A company that, for a period, had characters just as iconic, if not more iconic, than Disney's characters. In the same way that Mario is the face of video games, Mickey Mouse wasn't always the face of cartoons. There was another face. It was Bugs Bunny. And the differences between Disney and Warner Brothers, between Mickey Mouse and Looney Tunes, they're too many to even go over right now. We could be here for 3 videos just talking about that. But I think one of the main differences, one of the main philosophical differences between Disney and Warner Brothers and the Looney Tunes guys was the way they presented the characters. Over the years, Disney started to adopt a philosophy that's quite similar to what we're reading now from Nintendo. We just talked about that interview where, Nintendo said it's very important that Mario be the same from game to game. That's kind of the approach Disney has taken over the years. And you can call it conservative, or you can call it consistent. There are certainly positives and negatives. You can spin it either way you want. But either way, that's kind of the approach. But that's not exactly how they did it at Warner Brothers, at Termite Terrace, where they created Looney Tunes. Those guys had a slightly different approach to how they presented their characters. I'm going to read you another quote, and this is from Bob Clampett. He's one of the original directors who worked on the Looney Tunes, and in my mind, he's the best. He's one of the greatest cartoonists of all time. And this is a quote that he had about Bugs Bunny and Bugs' personality. He said that Bugs, like we humans, has varying moods. So at one time he's at peace with the world and he might be slow to react to a given situation or invasion of his privacy. Another time he's playful, right? He's in a mischievous mood. He's full of practical jokes, and you see that in a lot of Bugs Bunny cartoons. But at other times, Bugs is irritable. Bugs is bugged by the claim that a tortoise can beat a hare. So what Bob Clampett's saying there is that they didn't approach Bugs Bunny like he's the same character all the time. Or he is the same character, but a character should have different facets to his personality. And one of the things I love the most about the Looney Tunes, and one of the reasons I think it's the greatest cartoon series ever made, is that every director had a different approach to the characters. Bugs Bunny was different depending on who was directing him. So you got to see a different personality, not only of Bugs, but you got to see the personality of the director. And the cool thing is that this is something these guys were aware of. This is something they talked about. It was a conscious decision at Termite Terrace that this is how they were going to approach their cartoons. Here's another great quote from Chuck Jones, who was another Looney Tunes director. He said that Friz Freeling's Bugs Bunny was more of a scamp. He said Tex Avery's Bugs Bunny was a controlled lunatic, a brilliant lunatic, but a controlled lunatic. And speaking of Bob Clampett, he said that Clampett's was a completely amoral madman. Now this is one of the directors of Bugs Bunny talking about how all of his peers directed Bugs differently. And this wasn't cause for concern. This wasn't like, oh man, Bugs needs to be the same guy across all these cartoons. This wasn't a problem this was a positive. You know, these two have a lot in common. I mean, they're both icons, they're both the faces of their industry, they're both beloved by millions, they're still relevant after decades of being around. They both kind of stole the spotlight from their other characters. Mario was not originally the face at Nintendo, it was Donkey Kong. And Bugs was not originally the face of Warner Brothers Animation, it was Porky Pig. And these guys kind of came along and said, "No, we're awesome and now we're gonna run the show." So they have a lot in common. But the difference is, we've seen a lot more of Bugs' personality. And I think that's one of the reasons the Looney Tunes resonates the way it does even after all these years, is these characters are characters. They're more relatable because they're not always the same thing from day to day. I don't wake up in the same mood every day. It seems like Mario does. And in fact, they've never really fleshed out Mario's character at all. I mean, if we could talk a lot about what Bugs is and what his character is. But what's Mario? I mean, like, that's about it. That's all we know about Mario. He has a pretty hot girlfriend, and he used to be a plumber. I don't see him doing much of that anymore. That's about all we know about the guy. Mario isn't really a character as much as he's sort of just a vessel for the gameplay. And look, I'm not saying Nintendo needs to change the Super Mario series. But at the same time, Mario was at his most interesting in Donkey Kong, when he was the villain. We got to see a different side of his personality. That's not even his game. He's not even playable. I'd like to see a little bit of that Mario in his games. Not necessarily the bad guy, but a different guy. A normal guy. A guy with different sides of his personality. A guy with a personality. I'd like to see Nintendo take risks, not with Mario's gameplay, but with Mario's character. I'd like to see them add to his character. I'd like to see Nintendo make Mario a little more Bugs and a little less Mickey.